Hello, Vivre Musicale fans. I'm David Coonan and I'm a composer. I live in London, but currently I'm at home, in my family's home, in Ireland, in rainy Ireland. It's pouring rain outside. So greetings from the Emerald Isle. So the lovely people at Vivre Musicale thought it would be a cool idea were I to keep a video blog of the piece that I'm writing, so I'll keep you up to date on how it's sort of unfolding, the process of going from blank paper to a new song cycle for Vivre Musicale. And I thought I would, for this first video blog, which we're going to be doing once every 2 months, I would talk about the sort of genesis of the piece. I'll talk a bit about the ideas behind it, what I'm hoping to sort of do basically, and a little bit about the process of how I'm going to actually try to make this happen. Some of the sort of composition ideas of how I will start to compose it and sort of bring everything together. So Vivre Musicale came to me a few months ago asking would I write a piece for their 2012/13 season, which they're titling War and Peace. And they wanted me to write a piece that sort of reflected those two kind of states of being, states of war and states of peace. And we decided, after some discussion, that we'd do a song cycle. There's a kind of peculiar song cycle because it's 2 song cycles in one. So we're going to write a song cycle called Songs of War and a song cycle called Songs of Peace. And the sort of unusual thing about this new work is that it's 2 song cycles which are then literally superimposed on top of one another to make one big song cycle, which we're calling Songs of War and Peace. So at the moment, I'm reading through lots of poetry, basically, and trying to find texts that I can make song cycles out of. And I suppose the unusual thing about this particular piece and this project, and the particular challenge that is set by trying to have 2 song cycles that can work together, is trying to find texts that not only you really want to set to music and they're really beautiful or interesting, or you can really hear music when you read them, but trying to find texts that relate to one another and that can sort of be brought together, or as we're trying to do, superimpose on top of one another. And I suppose you're trying to find relationships that maybe through contrast, or maybe the poems are very much similar to one another and they can kind of meld in to create something that's like sort of both poems complement one another, or they can be really different, and sort of the contrast between the two of them sort of somehow makes them work. And I've discovered a few things in some of the poems that I've been reading that, you know, can potentially work, but it's sort of early days yet, so we'll get back to you about the poetry one in the next blog. But the other thing is, once you set them to music, is how do you make them relate musically? How can they work when sounding at the same time? And I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about sort of some of the ideas of how I'm going to do that. So the music nerds among you might know what these are. These are a set of quote-unquote pulse labyrinths, which is not my term, it's a term from a British composer called Sir Harrison Birtwistle. Birtwistle has used pulse labyrinths in a few of his pieces. But one of the reasons why I've sort of set these all out is because it helps me figure out that if I've got a melodic motif in one sort of tempo, how I can write it in another tempo, so that the two relate to one another. So I thought I'd play you sort of fooling around some things that I found that will sort of provide example of how that might work. So I have this motif which I have this motif which happens at a certain tempo, but it can happen in one context and then it happens in another context that are completely different, but when it happens at the same tempo, you sort of start to figure out how you might bring different things together. So the motif I had was... So it's a kind of simple melody, and just to show you an example of what these sort of pulse labyrinths help me do, is I'll play it to you in one sort of, in a context where there's lots of things happening around the tune, and then in another context where there's not many things happening around the tune. And sort of, you can get a feeling for how those two very different moods and contexts might be able to be superimposed on top of one another. So that's a sort of waltz-ish type kind of music box sort of context. And this is one where it's much more somber and sort of dark in its mood. So, there's an example of a tune that's at the same tempo in both pieces, or in both examples, but the context and the mood is totally different. And at the moment I'm reading through all these poems and sort of fiddling around, sort of inventing material that I think would work when it's set with one poem and it's set with another, and trying to figure out the different contexts that you can bring those two poems together. So, I hope that gives you an idea of sort of where I'm at with the piece, and you know, what the trajectory is for this project, and I hope you're interested and want to hear more, so keep tuned, and hopefully talk to you again in 2 months. I'm really excited about this project. It's something unlike anything I've done before, and it's kind of a real challenge. It's a bit scary, but you know, I relish that. So yeah, let's hopefully speak again in 2 months' time. Bye from Ireland.